You cannot be a hunter without talking about conservation. And you hear me talk about food, you hear me talk about culture. And all of those are part of an equation, part of a bridge that requires conservation. It's something that we as hunters have been practicing for the last 140 years. Conservation was not something America or the world itself had really embraced until hunters started standing up and saying, these wild places, these wild animals that depend on these places deserve better. That if we don't step up and do something, these wild animals and wild places will not be here. And in today's society, I think we take it for granted. But it wasn't always this way. The direction that wildlife and wild places was heading in this country was going downhill rapidly. There was this idea that it was infinite. It's not infinite, it is finite. We are fortunate that in North America, before it was all gone, we were able to see the value of conservation. Conservation of the landscapes, of the air, the water, everything we need and everything the wild creatures need. Other places in the world, it was gone before anyone realized the value of conservation. And the conservation of those public lands was something brought forth by hunters. Theodore Roosevelt, Gifford Pinchot, all of those in the late 1800s who said, we are going to do what we can to make sure that America has a wild place left when we're all done. And conservation in itself, as defined by Gifford Pinchot, is to provide the greatest good to the greatest number over the longest time. We as hunters accept that being part of the natural world brings with it a responsibility to do what you can to make the land and the wildlife and the wild places better tomorrow than it is today. We're the only group as hunters who have voluntarily taxed ourselves, licensed ourselves for the purpose of the wild places and the wildlife that lives here. That is an ethic, that's an ethos of who we are and what we are. That others might want to say they're conservationists, and I hope they are. But conservationist does not imply that you just walk away and look at it as though you're not part of that equation. Conservation requires to understand that man is part of this. Conservation requires that we think through the more complicated scenario of how do we have robust landscapes? How do we make them productive not just today but in the future? For all that need these landscapes, including humans. That's what conservation is. So many want to say that, oh, you just do conservation because you want to hunt and kill things. No, not at all. Because I hunt for my own food, I understand that if I want to hunt for my own food tomorrow and the next year and the next year, and I want my children and grandchildren to be able to do the same, I better stand up and be counted. I better put my shoulder to the wheel and push this conservation wagon further up the hill. That's my job, that's my responsibility. I owe it not just to me, but as Theodore Roosevelt said, I owe it to those yet unborn, those in the womb of time, but I also owe it to the other creatures, the wildlife that lives out here. That's who I owe it to. And I owe it to society. Because in a society this large, this complex, you cannot expect that everybody is going to come and be an advocate for the wild places to the degree that hunters are. And as hunters, we are out here on the landscape, interacting in a way that the rest of society is not. And I believe that because of our interaction with the wild, natural world, it's why we spend so much of our time, so much of our volunteerism, so much of our money to make conservation part of America. And it can be measured in acres, it can be measured in dollars. but it can't be measured in terms of what it means to our society. Conservation is a perpetual process. Conservation is not saying, I did this today and now I can stop. Conservation requires a daily, weekly, monthly, annual commitment to doing what we can to make these places better. And by making them better, it's not just for us as hunters or us as a society. It's better for the entire system. And as long as I hunt, I'm going to be a conservationist. And long after I put my bow away or I retire my rifles to the vault, I will be doing what I can for conservation. And to me, conservation is not just something to talk about. To me as a hunter, conservation is something I live, I do, I eat, I breathe. And I mean that honestly. Everything I eat, drink, live, and breathe is connected to what we as a society, what we as hunters can do for conservation.